Wouldn't it be nice to go back in time to give yourself advice as a beginning drummer? Do you think you would actually listen? We all have our own unique path to learning music, and while we can't go back in time just yet, there are some things I would love to tell myself as a kid fresh on the scene. It's not like I regret the path that I took. I did many things right, like joining a band early and working on my fundamentals, such as rudiments and learning how to read music. But you don't know what you don't know. And looking back, had someone given me the advice I'm about to share, my playing would have dramatically improved. And it's possible I would have had a lot more satisfying gigs for myself, as well as the rest of the band and the audience. Don't get me wrong though. When you are starting out, it is especially important to try different ideas without worrying about the outcome. But had I known the importance of some of these things I'm about to share, it would have given me much more focus. Here are 5 tips I would give my younger self if I could, and I hope this advice can help you on your drumming journey. Let's get into it. Number 1, I would tell myself to practice dynamics, specifically interdynamics. I talked about the importance of interdynamics in my video about Chad Smith, which you can check out here. Dynamics are one of the crucial elements that set apart the beginner from the pro drummer. While of course, timing is of the utmost importance for any musician, dynamic control usually comes along much later after you've developed some dexterity and control. Instead, most drummers usually avoid it altogether and focus on flashy things like playing fast. One thing that plagues beginning drummers, including me when I was first starting out, is having dynamically flat sounding grooves. It wasn't until I discovered the book Future Sounds by the great David Garibaldi of Tower of Power fame that I started taking dynamics more seriously. In that book, I was encouraged to practice grooves and patterns by varying my stick height to achieve distinctly different dynamics. For instance, I would make sure to get a solid crack on my rim shots for the backbeat by having the stick begin at maximum height, and then I'd immediately get the stick in position for ghost notes by keeping it an inch or so off the snare head. It sounds obvious in theory, but it's extremely difficult to implement. Once you work on the concept in a simple way, it becomes a part of everything that you practice, which builds your muscle memory and ultimately makes your grooves sound way more musical. This change alone would have vastly improved my playing. Number 2 is learning to play the room. We get one sonic perspective when we sit behind the kit. All the sound is coming back at you, and I used to only play with this perspective in mind. But your sound can be perceived vastly different depending on where one is standing in relation to the kit. What does it mean to play the room? Simply, playing to the room could mean playing quieter in a small space or louder in a large space. In a reverberant space with lots of wood paneling or glass, it could mean covering your drum heads with tape, burying the bass drum beater, and leaving your stick on the head after you strike a drum. In a dry sounding space with carpeting and heavy curtains, it might mean playing with more sustain and open tuning. The main thing is to develop an awareness of how different size rooms affect your sound. This also means considering the overall stage volume and whether or not you are mic'd up. When using mics, you can help keep the stage volume down and make the engineer's job a lot easier by playing softer and especially not bashing your cymbals. As far as the dynamic balance of the kit goes, you can almost never go wrong by playing your bass drum or even your snare louder than the cymbals. This means technique-wise, you need to have great dynamic control of all your limbs and not just your hands. Understanding the different types of rooms there are and how your playing translates is an important skill to master. Next time you perform during sound check, have someone play your drums while you stand out in front of the kit, and then change positions to hear the difference and adjust your playing accordingly. So number 3 is something I avoided early on, but absolutely would have been a game changer, and that is to record myself as much as possible. Whether it's recording your practice sessions to track your progress or taping live shows, it's so important to be able to listen back to your playing and determine where improvements could be made. It's hard to assess your playing during a live performance. You're so focused on technique and just getting through this song that it's hard to be objective about your playing as a whole. But eventually you develop an awareness to know exactly what you are playing, with the ability to also listen critically to the other band members in the moment. Honestly, I was afraid of recording myself in the beginning because I knew it wasn't as good as it could have been, and the thought of reliving it via recording did not sound appealing. Plus, it was a challenge to record yourself in the 90s. At the time, I only had a cheap cassette recorder that made my drums sound distorted whenever I tried to record myself. It ended up being more trouble than it was worth, and there were no phones with portable recording software available. Could I have figured it out? Probably, but I didn't want to hear myself anyway. Today, it's so easy to record yourself that there's no excuse not to. Take advantage of it. Number 4 is something I didn't have easy access to, but I would have told myself to do whatever it takes to get a private teacher who could serve as a guide and a mentor. As a mostly self-taught drummer, it would have been nice to have access to someone who is farther along on the journey than me. They could have helped me focus my practice on the things that really mattered and accelerated my learning. This would have saved me lots of anguish. Someone I admired as a beginning drummer was the great Tony Williams. Tony was hired by Miles Davis when he was only 17 years old, where he would go on to shape music history. But prior to that, Tony was a student of legendary music educator Alan Dawson. Tony began studying with Alan when he was 11 years old, and Alan would go out of his way to pick up Tony and take him to his gigs to sit in. This kind of mentorship cannot be underestimated. People who excel, whether they are athletes, artists, or musicians, can all benefit from having someone knowledgeable provide objective feedback. It's especially important when you're just starting out. A popular opinion amongst many musicians is that it's not cool to have a mentor or a teacher, and that we should be able to figure everything out on our own. But knowing what I know now, I would have gone out of my way to work with someone serious about helping me improve. Finally, number 5 is learning how to tune your drums. I wasn't nearly as obsessed with gear early on like so many other drummers. It was considered a badge of honor to play any set of drums no matter how bad they sounded. I remember trying to tune the drums at my school or on a travel date, but no matter which way I turned the drum key, it was hard to know what sounded good. How should I tune the top head, bottom head, higher, lower? How will that sound to the audience? Having that awareness is so important and would have absolutely made a huge difference in my sound. You should be able to play any kit and make it sound good, but having great sounding drums will make your life so much easier. To help you, I've created a handy drum set tuning guide that has all the tips and tricks I wish I had known when I was getting started. It's absolutely free to download, link in the description. What's one thing that you would go back and tell your younger self? It's important to remember that it's all about the journey and not the destination. Focus on growing every day and make sure you consistently engage with music and your drumming. If you want to learn how to practice more effectively, I have a video on that right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.